I saw her on a TV show, and I had never seen her before, and I said, that's it.
For decades, Robert Redford was the embodiment of calm in chaos, the gentleman of New Hollywood. While others exploded, faded, or flamed out, Redford stayed grounded, golden, and above the fray. He didn't chase headlines, he didn't trade in gossip, and he never aired dirty laundry. Until now. At 88, the Oscar-winning icon finally said what those closest to him have known for years. There were actors who made the work unbearable, men he clashed with behind closed doors, legends he couldn't stand. And while the performances were iconic, the experiences were anything but. These aren't rumors. These are names, and some will break your heart because by the time you reach the final name on Redford's list, you might never watch one of Hollywood's most beloved classics the same way again. Gene Hackman. They shared the screen in Downhill Racer and circled other projects over the years, but Redford and Hackman were never friends and never wanted to be. Hackman, a powerhouse of raw intensity, often clashed with Redford's composed, controlled style on set. Hackman was known to explode in rehearsals, challenge direction, and disregard subtlety in favor of brute force. Redford found it exhausting. He's one of the greats, Redford once admitted to a colleague, but he never cared who he steamrolled to get there. What began as mutual respect in the 1970s quickly turned into guarded distance. Redford admired Hackman's work ethic. Nobody could accuse him of laziness, but he found the methods unbearable. Hackman approached each role like a battlefield. He didn't just act, he dominated. Directors were often caught in the crossfire, and co-stars became collateral damage. Redford, who preferred collaboration and quiet discipline, found volatility disruptive. You never knew which Hackman you'd get. One assistant director said of Downhill Racer, brilliant or belligerent. There were small flare-ups throughout the shoot, but one moment cemented their fracture. During a crucial scene that relied on subtle emotion, Hackman was reportedly furious over a lighting setup he felt was unflattering. He refused to leave his trailer, delaying production for nearly an hour. The director attempted to intervene. To no avail. Redford finally walked to Hackman's trailer himself, opened the door, and in front of crew told him, "This isn't your movie, Gene, it's a team effort. Show up or step aside." Hackman showed up, but the two never spoke off camera again. In private, Redford would refer to Hackman as a sledgehammer in a violin shop. It wasn't a question of talent. Redford never denied Hackman's greatness. It was about control, temperament, and basic respect. Redford, who had begun quietly producing and directing by the late 70s, reportedly vetoed Hackman's name on more than one casting list. Not worth it, he'd write in the margins. Brilliant actor, impossible human. Their careers continued to parallel each other through the decades. Both Oscar winners, both icons of the New Hollywood era, but they never shared the screen again. When asked years later if he regretted not working with Hackman more, Redford paused and gave a diplomatic smile. Some pairings, he said, only need to happen once. He left it at that. He's one of the greats, Redford once admitted to a colleague, but he never cared who he steamrolled to get there. James Woods. Their political and personal philosophies couldn't have been more different, and while they never shared a full film, Woods auditioned for supporting roles in Redford projects more than once and was consistently rejected. Redford later revealed he found Woods deeply unsettling and intensely difficult to even sit in a room with. One casting session ended with Redford reportedly walking out after Woods challenged him on Vietnam policy during a read for a courtroom drama. He brought chaos to places that needed quiet. Redford said later, "I wasn't interested in managing that energy. It wasn't just a matter of politics, though, that certainly didn't help." Redford, measured, principled, and understated, found Woods's confrontational style exhausting. Woods prided himself on being the smartest guy in the room, but Redford didn't care for games of intellectual one-upmanship. He never wanted to understand the story. Redford reportedly said of their earliest meeting, he wanted to dominate it. The two men existed on opposite ends of the creative spectrum. Redford thrived in quiet intensity, character nuance, emotional layering. Woods, by contrast, exploded into rooms with kinetic force, sharp-wired, often unpredictable. He could give you brilliance, one casting director said, but you had to survive the storm first. Redford wasn't willing to take that chance. The clash became folklore among casting directors. One particularly tense encounter happened in the late 80s during pre-production for a legal thriller Redford was developing. Woods came in for a supporting role and launched into the scene with razor-sharp precision, only to break character halfway through to debate a line's political implication. What began as an acting exercise quickly devolved into a lecture on Cold War foreign policy. Redford listened for less than 2 minutes before closing the script and leaving the room. "If I wanted a debate," he said afterward, "I'd go back to college." Even years later, Woods continued to needle Redford in interviews and private industry panels, while never naming him directly. Woods would occasionally reference Hollywood hypocrites who preach peace but run studios like generals. Insiders who knew the history saw through the coded language. Redford, for his part, refused to respond publicly, but the blacklisting was silent and absolute. His casting notes reportedly included a single blunt phrase next to Woods' name: never, ever. Woods' undeniable talent made him a favorite for edgy, unpredictable roles, but Redford wanted none of it. There's a difference between tension and toxicity. He once said he never understood that line. The opportunities evaporated. The phone never rang again. And even as Woods' career shifted more toward controversy than craft, Redford stayed. Silent text for the occasional sharp comment in private rooms. He brought chaos to places that needed quiet, Redford said later. I wasn't interested in managing that energy. Dustin Hoffman, All the President's Men may have immortalized them as one of cinema's most iconic duos, but Redford was always quietly frustrated by Hoffman's approach. Hoffman improvised frequently, challenged scripts, and had a habit of changing blocking mid-scene. Redford, a director's actor with laser focus, hated the unpredictability. He felt Hoffman tried to dominate the camera with little regard for collaboration. They were never openly hostile, but when asked why they never worked together again, Redford simply said, once was enough. From the outside, it was magic, two of the biggest stars of the 1970s portraying real life. Journalists unraveling the biggest political scandal in American history. But behind the scenes, it was a slow, grinding clash of two very different artistic philosophies. Redford came to set prepared, meticulous, and dialed in. Hoffman preferred spontaneity, sometimes altering his delivery on the fly, throwing off rhythm and energy that Redford had spent hours shaping. Crew members described the atmosphere as quietly tense, not explosive. Not dramatic, just uneasy. Hoffman would rehearse a scene one way and shoot it another. He would subtly reposition himself during takes to shift the visual focus, often stepping into Redford's light. At first, Redford tried to shrug it off as part of the creative process. But as production wore on, the interruptions began to wear him down. There was one scene, a phone call sequence in the newsroom, where Hoffman reportedly did 7 takes, each with a different tone, pacing, and set of unscripted lines. Redford, who had to react off those unpredictable changes, was said to be seething by the end. Director Alan J. Pakula walked the line delicately, never letting the tension boil over, but everyone on set could feel it. You could tell Bob was biting his tongue, one lighting tech recalled. Every single day, behind closed doors, Redford voiced concerns about losing narrative cohesion. We're trying to tell a story, he was overheard saying to Pakula during a break, not chase 1,000 little moments. Still, the director kept both stars in orbit, barely knowing the result would be unforgettable, even if the process was. Fragile Redford, who would go on to direct his own critically acclaimed films, valued precision, efficiency, discipline. To him, acting was a team sport, and Hoffman often felt like a player trying to win alone. Redford never spoke publicly against Hoffman, but when retrospectives and reunion panels were pitched years later, he declined them all. There was no falling out, no scandal, just a mutual, unspoken agreement: never again. Some people just don't click, even if the film is a masterpiece. Tom Cruise, their only collaboration, Lions for Lambs, was a disaster behind the scenes. Redford, who directed the film, struggled to get past Cruise's corporate mindset. Every note was about optics. Redford later said, not emotion, not honesty, guest brand. Cruise reportedly pushed for scene changes, shot angles, even last-minute rewrites. The film flopped, and Redford walked away from the experience, calling it one of the most frustrating projects of my career. He never spoke to Cruise again. When the project was first pitched, it seemed like a dream pairing. Redford, the elder statesman of thoughtful American cinema, and Cruise, the blockbuster juggernaut trying to pivot toward serious material. But from the beginning, the chemistry was off. Redford envisioned a stripped-down political drama, understated, cerebral, and timely. Cruise came in talking about lighting, camera angles, wardrobe, and global messaging. It wasn't collaboration, it was collision. Insiders say the tension was immediate. Cruise, also a producer on the film, wanted final say on nearly everything, from poster design to pacing in the edit. He reportedly arrived at production meetings, flanked by a team of publicists and image consultants, and often used words like market positioning and viewer perception in place of more typical actor-director language. Redford, a man who once spent 3 days rehearsing a silent scene for ordinary people, was appalled. Even the rehearsal process exposed the rift. Cruise requested stylists on standby during blocking sessions, reportedly because he wanted his physical silhouette to communicate discipline. Redford, stunned, remarked later, I wanted the scene to show vulnerability. He wanted it to show symmetry. The two couldn't agree on what the film was even about. Redford saw it as a cautionary tale about institutional failure. Cruise viewed it as a redemption arc for a charismatic leader. On set, the energy only grew more strained. Cruise would often stop mid-scene to request a lighting adjustment, or to suggest a punchier line that wasn't in the script. Redford, patient to a fault, tried to accommodate it first. But by week 3, he was openly frustrated. One assistant on the film described a moment during a take when Redford leaned in and quietly asked, "Are we acting, or are we selling a campaign ad?" Even in post-production, Cruise's fingerprints were everywhere. He reportedly requested multiple cuts of his scenes, arguing about the exact length of a reaction shot. Redford gave him rope until the studio intervened and sided with Cruise. That was the final straw. Redford delivered the film he could, washed his hands of it, and skipped nearly all of the press. The movie opened to lukewarm reviews and underwhelming box office numbers. Cruise moved on. Redford went silent. The experience left a mark not just as a creative failure, but as a philosophical breakdown. One man trying to say something, the other trying to sell something. He never spoke to Cruise again.